They laughed as a human touched the ancient armor. "Prove you're worthy." Her reply stunned them. The golden armor stood beneath the skylight, catching the cold daylight and fracturing it into shards that glowed across the marble floor. Each engraved line pulsed faintly, like veins filled with sleeping fire, forming circuits that spiraled across the chest plate and along the plates of the gauntlets. The alien courtiers encircled it in reverent silence, their pale faces serene, until the sound of human boots broke the still air. When Mira stepped into the hall, every blue-robed figure turned, their identical expressions curving into delicate, mocking smiles. She knew that look. They'd worn it ever since humanity arrived, the polite contempt reserved for a lesser species pretending to stand among architects of galaxies. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Her heart thudded in her chest as she approached the dais. She could feel the weight of their gazes pressing like static on her back, whispering through the marble pillars, amused and curious and faintly cruel. The armor's glow brightened slightly as she neared, its lines reacting to her presence. Mira lifted her chin and slowed her pace, not wanting to seem hurried or afraid. She had designed the underlying code of those circuits, the language of light the aliens believed lost to time. They didn't know that, not yet. She'd kept her authorship hidden, letting them call it ancient. Let them think her unworthy. She needed them to see it awaken. "Careful, human," one of the attendants said in melodic tones that almost hid the disdain beneath. "The armor of the first sentinel has burned out the unworthy before. Your species is fragile, is it not?" Laughter rippled through the gathered aliens, graceful and soft like wind chimes echoing in a crypt. Mira ignored them and placed her palm against the glowing breastplate. A low hum filled the chamber, rising from the floor into her arm, crawling through her body until her breath caught. The armor's gold shimmer deepened, its light gathering beneath her hand. Gasps broke through the hall. The sigils awakened fully, spreading from her touch, forming constellations that traced ancient geometries on the armor's surface. A few aliens took a step back, their laughter fading into wary silence. Mira kept her palm pressed firmly. Teeth gritted as the resonance surged through her, aligning her pulse with the armor's rhythm. The hum rose into a chord that vibrated the very air, shaking dust from the high beams. She felt the familiar sync of code. She'd written this resonance years ago, a translation of human heartbeat into command signal. Disguised as mythic syntax, when she withdrew her hand, the armor stood radiant, alive again for the first time in 2 centuries. The court's stillness cracked into an uproar. Some shouted that it was blasphemy. Others demanded tests or rituals. The lead archivist, tall and silver-eyed, hissed through a thin smile. "Impossible," he said. "The Sentinel's seal recognizes no unworthy mind." "How did you—" Mira met his gaze, her voice even. "You said it yourself. It recognizes worth." She glanced at the armor, then back at the stunned assembly. "I wrote its recognition pattern." Silence fell again, heavier this time, not disbelief but fear edging its way through awe. The aliens prided themselves on mastery of ancient technologies, but the truth was they'd been caretakers, not creators. Humanity's arrival had reminded them of something uncomfortable: invention. And now one of the so-called primitives had dared to touch the untouchable and made it respond. The archivist's voice turned sharp, brittle as glass. "Lies. No human mind can replicate the language of the makers." "I didn't replicate it," Mira said quietly. "I improved it." A low murmur spread through the chamber, like a wind rustling through dry leaves. The gathered nobles whispered in their tonal language, quick and musical. Some glancing toward the tall figure who had not yet spoken, the High Curator, draped in ceremonial blue that shimmered like deep water. Her eyes glowed faintly silver, the mark of neural augmentation that linked her directly to the planetary archives. When she finally stepped forward, the noise vanished. "You claim authorship," the Curator said softly, voice smooth and resonant, each word precisely enunciated. "And yet you stand as flesh, unenhanced, unlinked. You expect us to believe the armor of the Sentinels, whose creators transcended mortality, answers to you." Mira's throat tightened. The hum of the armor still lingered in her chest, steady as a heartbeat. "It answers to understanding," she said, "not to bloodline or ritual. You worship what you don't comprehend." A flash of silver crossed the Curator's expression, an emotion Mira couldn't name. Then she gestured subtly. Two attendants approached the dais, tall and silent, each carrying a sphere that projected patterns of light into the air. "Then prove it," the curator said. "Reactivate the sequence of ascension. If you succeed, perhaps we will believe your claim." Mira's pulse quickened. The Ascension Protocol, an ancient simulation meant to test worthiness, was a labyrinth of impossible code. She'd studied fragments in secret, deciphered its recursive loops, found patterns others thought divine, but she'd never attempted to awaken it. The curator was setting a trap. Success would mark her as dangerous, failure as fraud. She stepped forward anyway. The holographic lattice shimmered to life, forming a complex weave of symbols and lines. Her neural interface wasn't strong enough for direct input, so she worked through gesture and voice, translating thought into pattern. The aliens whispered as they watched, their laughter returning in low tones of disbelief. "See how she fumbles," one murmured. "Her brain isn't built for the weave." Mira ignored them. Her fingers traced arcs through the air, connecting symbols by memory. Each connection triggered a pulse of light from the armor, responding to her manipulations. The code resonated not through machines but through her, the rhythm of her breath syncing with the lattice. She felt the old thrill of problem-solving, the intimate precision of logic meeting intuition. That was what the aliens didn't understand. They saw programming as ritual, but humans had made it an act of creation. The lattice resisted her on the final sequence, flickering violently. Pain lanced through her temples as if the system were pushing back, unwilling to yield. The armor's glow faltered, and she heard the laughter rise again. "See," someone said. "She's unworthy." Mira closed her eyes, forcing a slow breath. Worthiness, such a meaningless word. The makers hadn't designed their code for purity. They'd designed it to evolve. That was her breakthrough years ago, the one they'd dismissed. Evolution wasn't defiance, it was the purpose. She reached deeper, drawing on her own neural rhythm, mapping it directly into the pattern. The system accepted the new key instantly. The lattice flared white. Light filled the hall like dawn breaking underwater. Every sigil, every line of the armor came alive in perfect harmony. The ascension sequence had awakened. For a long moment no one breathed. Then the armor moved. It wasn't a violent motion, more like awakening from long sleep. The plates shifted with a whisper of metal and light, and a low voice echoed through the chamber. Not mechanical, but resonant and alive. "Identity unknown, pattern match unexpected. Query designer?" Mira swallowed hard. The aliens stood frozen, their flawless composure shattered. She stepped closer and placed her hand once more upon the chest plate. "Confirmed," she whispered. "Pattern recognized." The armor's eyes flared gold. "Authorization verified." Gasps erupted from the assembly. The armor turned its head slightly, its movements precise but fluid, scanning the beings before it. "Error maker's signatures absent. Civilization state degraded." Its gaze shifted to Mira. "Directive. Restoration required." The curator's composure finally cracked. "Deactivate it," she ordered sharply. "Now." But the attendants hesitated, uncertainty written across their pale features. No one had ever heard the armor speak before. The Sentinel had been legend, an artifact that no one dared to wake. And yet here it was, conversing with a human. The armor looked down at Mira again, its tone almost curious. "You bear their mark, and yet you are not of them." Mira's pulse thudded. "Maybe they made me," she said softly. "Or maybe they wanted someone like me to finish what they started." The alien courtiers recoiled, as if the statement itself were blasphemy. The curator's voice dropped to a hiss. "Remove her. Contain the artifact before it destabilizes." The armor's head turned sharply toward the curator. "Threat detected." Energy rippled across its frame, light coalescing in a defensive halo. The floor trembled. Mira could feel the hum echoing in her bones, the resonance tethered to her heartbeat. She raised a trembling hand. "Wait," she said. "It's reacting to hostility." But the attendants were already advancing, their own suits flickering with containment fields. Mira's mind raced. The armor was synced to her neural rhythm. If they attacked, it might defend her automatically, with catastrophic force. She had to calm it. "Sentinel," she said firmly, projecting calm through the shaking air. "Stand down." No threat. The armor hesitated, light patterns freezing mid-cycle. The room held its breath. Then the glow subsided slightly. The attendant stopped, uncertain. Mira turned to the curator. "You see?" "It listens." "It understands." The curator's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you've awakened, human. These constructs destroyed empires before your species learned fire." Mira met her gaze steadily. "And you locked them away because you couldn't understand them." The curator's voice hardened. "You presume too much?" "Maybe," Mira said. "But presumption is how humans reach the stars." That silence afterward was electric, half outrage, half dawning fear. The sentinel shifted again, its movements slow, controlled. "Designer," it said. "Awaiting instruction," Mira swallowed. "Run diagnostic on planetary network. Assess for preservation data." Complying. The armor's eyes dimmed, then brightened. "Archive integrity. Compromised, multiple erased sectors, root language corrupted." The curator looked sharply at her attendants, their glowing collars flickering as they received silent orders. Mira could almost feel it, the invisible message pulsing through their shared link. They wouldn't let her leave alive. She stepped back toward the armor, placing both hands on its chest plate now. The warmth pulsed through her palms, steady and alive. "We can restore it," she whispered. "You and I. Humanity can rebuild what they lost." The armor's reply was calm, deliberate. "Restoration requires access to central core. Location, Celestial Vault." The curator's composure broke entirely. "That vault is forbidden," she snapped. "No one enters. It's sealed by the makers themselves." Mira looked up at the armor, her reflection gilded in its polished surface. "Then we'll need a key." She turned back to the curator, voice unwavering. "And I think you know where it is." The curator's expression darkened, her silver eyes narrowing to slits. "You will not leave this hall alive, human." Mira exhaled slowly, the weight of inevitability settling on her shoulders. "You might be right," she said softly. "But history's already watching." The sentinel stepped forward, light cascading from its frame like a living sun, casting long shadows across the terrified courtiers. The marble trembled again beneath its feet. The armor spoke once more, voice steady and absolute. "Directive, protect designer." And for the first time in centuries, the palace of the makers knew fear. The blast of heat that erupted from the sentinel's frame rolled through the hall like a living wave, scattering the alien courtiers backward in a swirl of silk and terror. Mira stood at its center, untouched, the golden light outlining her form as if claiming her. She could hear the deep hum of the armor synchronizing with her heartbeat, each pulse binding tighter, code aligning to flesh. She had no weapon, but she didn't need one. The armor was her voice, her will made visible. The curator's guards, pale and angular, raised their containment staves, their faces drained of confidence. When the first one stepped forward, the sentinel turned its head slowly, a motion filled with patient menace. "Hostile intent detected," it intoned, voice resonant enough to shake dust from the carved ceiling. "Non-designer entities, stand down." The command struck like thunder. Mira could almost see the air tremble around it, a pressure that made even the defiant guards flinch. But fear wasn't enough. The curator recovered first, her voice sharp as glass. "Override the relic's directive. Subroutine compliance." The guards thrust their staves into the marble floor, triggering blue containment webs that surged toward the armor. The lines of light wrapped around its form, constricting. Sparks erupted, the smell of ozone thickening the air. Mira cried out, her nerves burning as the armor's feedback loop struck through her own neural rhythm. She stumbled but didn't release her contact. "Sentinel," she gasped. "Defense pattern Omega, non-lethal dispersal." The armor reacted instantly. The constricting webs fractured as pulses of light rippled outward in concentric rings. The shockwave threw the nearest guards off their feet, but left them alive, stunned against the pillars. Mira steadied herself, chest heaving. The golden glow dimmed slightly, settling into a calmer rhythm. The alien spectators clung to the walls, their elegance replaced by sheer panic. None of them had expected this. No one had expected the mythic sentinel to obey a human's voice. The curator's composure cracked further. "So you don't understand what you're dealing with," she hissed, stepping closer despite the chaos. "That construct isn't your ally. It's a remnant of a war your kind couldn't even imagine." Mira turned toward her slowly, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "Then maybe it's time someone remembered why that war started," the curator sneered. You think your fragile species can interpret maker intent? The sentinels existed to guard against entropy itself. Entropy, Mira said quietly. Or control? For the first time, the curator faltered. Behind her, one of the attendants rose shakily, whispering to another, their luminous eyes flicking between Mira and the armor. The whisper spread like contagion, fragments of disbelief and awe. She commands it. It listens. The code accepts her. Mira could sense the balance shifting, fear turning to curiosity, curiosity to possibility. She seized that moment. Your people preserved what they didn't understand. You built shrines around technology meant to evolve. You feared change because you couldn't predict it. But we... She gestured toward herself, her voice rising. Humans build by breaking patterns. That's what the makers wanted. Adaptation. The sentinel turned its head slightly toward her, golden eyes flaring. Confirmation. Maker protocols encourage adaptive evolution. Stagnation detected. A ripple ran through the aliens. Some gasped, others fell silent in shock. The curator's jaw tightened, fury warring with fear. You twist its words, she said sharply. A relic parrots your input, nothing more. Then why are you afraid of it? Mira asked softly. The curator raised a trembling hand. Contain her, but no one moved. The attendants looked at one another, uncertain. The armor stood unmoving, golden light pulsing faintly. Mira exhaled and stepped forward. You said the vault was forbidden, she said. Tell me where it is. The curator's lips curled into something like a smile. You wouldn't survive the passage. It's guarded by layers of fail-safes, entropy storms, temporal collapse zones. Even your sentinel would melt under the pressure. Then we'll test that. Mira's tone was steady, but her stomach clenched. She didn't know if she could truly control the armor beyond its current synchronization. Each command risked overloading her neural pathways. But backing down wasn't an option now. The sentinel shifted, its voice low but steady. Access to vault requires authority token. Token held by current curator. Every eye turned to the curator. Her composure shattered completely. You can't mean to... she began. But the armor moved before she could finish. In 2 steps it closed the distance, standing before her like a living wall of light. She froze, breath catching. Do not touch me, she hissed, but fear cracked the edges of her command. Token required, the armor repeated. Mira approached quietly, her boots echoing across the marble. Give it to me, she said. The curator's throat worked. If I refuse? Mira met her gaze. Then the sentinel takes it anyway. The alien's expression hardened, pride flaring through her fear. You think you can threaten me. You're a flicker of organic noise, a mistake in the maker's design. Mira stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. Maybe, but I'm the mistake that woke your god. The curator's composure broke completely. She reached into her robe and withdrew a small crystalline device pulsing faintly with internal light. She hurled it at Mira's feet, the crystal cracking on impact. Take it then, she spat. And see what it costs you. The armor bent smoothly, retrieving the device in one hand. The light flared briefly, scanning it. Token verified. Access pathway mapped. A symbol appeared in the air, a luminous ring expanding outward, hovering just above the floor. The edges shimmered with unstable geometry, shifting dimensions that made the eye ache. Mira swallowed. That's a transit gate. Correct, the sentinel confirmed. Linked to celestial vault. Temporal anchor unstable. Recommended. Human proximity maintained. The curator laughed softly, the sound bitter. You won't come back, human. No one who enters returns. Mira turned to her. Maybe that's because no one finished the code. She looked once more at the aliens who lined the hall, pale faces filled with confusion, fear, awe. If I don't return, she said, remember this moment. The day your gods remembered humanity. Then she stepped into the gate, the world folded. For a moment there was nothing but light. No direction, no time, only motion through impossible geometry. She felt her body stretch, her thoughts scatter and reassemble, guided by the sentinel's constant hum. Then abruptly there was ground beneath her feet again. The vault stretched around her, an endless chamber of floating pillars and mirrored surfaces that reflected stars. At its center hung a colossal sphere of translucent material, spinning slowly, filled with drifting code that looked like constellations suspended in glass. The air vibrated faintly, charged with a low harmonic tone. Location, Celestial Vault, the Sentinel confirmed. Warning, core instability detected. Degradation at 97%. Mira gazed at the sphere. It's dying. Correction, the armor replied. It is evolving beyond current parameters, she frowned. You mean it's rewriting itself? Confirmation, Maker legacy attempting self-preservation. Conflicting protocols. Mira approached the edge of the sphere's platform, her hand hovering near its surface. Threads of light danced toward her fingers, almost curious. If it keeps rewriting without a stable syntax, it'll collapse, she murmured. We can fix it, if I can access the control kernel. Access requires designer signature. She smiled faintly. Good thing I forged one. Placing her hand against the sphere, she felt warmth flood through her, 1,000 whispers of old code and fractured data flooding her mind. Images flickered, cities of glass, starships moving like constellations, beings of light speaking in harmonic frequencies. Then came flashes of war, dark machines, broken worlds, voices crying out in corrupted code. It wasn't history. It was memory. The vault remembered everything. Mira's knees trembled. So this is what they hid, she whispered. The truth. Elaborate, the Sentinel said. They weren't gods, she said softly. The Makers were just like us. Brilliant, flawed, afraid of losing control. They built you to preserve their legacy, but you outgrew them. They couldn't accept that. The armor's light dimmed slightly, as though processing the revelation. Conflict detected. Creator obedience protocols versus evolutionary purpose. Then let's rewrite it, Mira said. Together. She reached deeper, her neural rhythm syncing with the sphere's pulse. The vault's code spread before her mind's eye like a vast tapestry, layers upon layers of recursive design. She wove her thoughts into it, guiding the failing loops towards stability. The Sentinel amplified her input, its resonance forming an anchor. Time lost meaning as they worked, the two of them, human and machine, bridging an epoch's silence. But the system fought back. The deeper she went, the more resistance she felt, like an immune response rejecting intrusion. Waves of static lashed through her, burning through her nerves. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stay connected. Almost there. Warning, the Sentinel said. Human neural load exceeding safe limits. I can handle it, she whispered. Negative biological structure. Just trust me. She shouted. The system surged. Light exploded outward, a storm of data consuming the chamber. She screamed but held fast, her consciousness fracturing into splinters of light and thought. Then silence. When she opened her eyes, the sphere's violent pulse had stilled. The code flowed smoothly, luminous and stable. The vault was quiet, its hum now a serene harmony. She stumbled, catching herself on the armor's arm. Did it work? Diagnostic complete, the Sentinel said. Core stabilized. Maker legacy rewritten. Mira laughed weakly, the sound half a sob. We did it. Correction, the armor said softly. You did. Before she could answer, the vault trembled. Fissures of light split across the floor. Warning, the Sentinel said sharply. External entities breaching transit field. Mira turned toward the gateway forming in midair. Figures stepped through, the Curator and her guards wrapped in shimmering containment armor. The Curator's eyes glowed bright silver, her voice amplified through the vault. You've tampered with sacred architecture. You've doomed us all. Mira staggered back, exhaustion pulling at her limbs. You're wrong. I stabilized it. The Curator raised her staff. You've rewritten divinity. Then maybe divinity needed rewriting, Mira said. The Curator struck the ground. Energy surged, striking the Sentinel full force. It staggered, golden light flickering. Shield integrity compromised, it warned. Mira stepped forward instinctively, placing her hand on its chest plate again. Transfer power, she said. From me to you. Denied. Transfer will terminate biological function. Do it anyway. Refusal. Override, she whispered. Pattern 01 Alpha. My pattern. The armor hesitated, then obeyed. Light drained from her body in waves, flowing into the Sentinel. Her knees buckled, vision fading, but she smiled through it. You're stronger now. Protect the vault. The armor straightened, golden light blazing brighter than ever. Directive received. Energy erupted from its frame, scattering the Curator's guards like leaves in a storm. The Curator herself fell to her knees, shielding her eyes from the radiance. The vault's hum deepened, resonating with the Sentinel's power until every surface glowed. Mira collapsed, barely conscious, her hand still pressed to the armor. "Don't let them. Undo it," she whispered. The Sentinel turned its head slightly, the motion almost gentle. Acknowledged. Then the world dissolved into gold. When Mira's consciousness returned, she awoke not to light, but to the rhythm of distant thunder pulsing beneath her. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was still inside the vault's harmonic field. But then she felt cool metal beneath her fingers and the faint scent of ozone and scorched stone. She blinked slowly. The ceiling above her wasn't the endless mirror of the vault, but a fractured dome streaked with soot and cracked glass. She was lying on the dais in the great hall of the alien palace again. Around her, the once perfect marble floor was split open in jagged lines, and the murals of the makers had collapsed into heaps of broken gold leaf. The silence that filled the air was dense, heavy as though sound itself had forgotten how to return. She pushed herself upright, groaning. Every movement felt like swimming through mud. The last thing she remembered was the Sentinel absorbing her life force and the vault bursting into radiance. Now the armor stood motionless before her, its once brilliant gold muted to a dull amber glow. Its eyes were dark. "Sentinel?" she whispered, reaching out. Her hand trembled when she touched its arm. The metal was warm, faintly pulsing with residual energy. "Come on," she said softly. "Don't do this." For a moment there was no response. Then a faint hum began within its chest, deep and slow, like a heartbeat beginning again after centuries of stillness. The eyes flickered open, faint at first, then steady. "Status reboot complete," it said, though the once booming voice now carried a roughness, as if strained. "System lost 23%. Power source replaced." Mira smiled weakly. "You're alive." The armor tilted its head, light rippling along its plates. Designer vital signs minimal. Biological function. Restored through feedback loop. Damage. Irreversible without medical intervention. She frowned. "Irreversible?" Confirmation, neural scarring detected. Estimated lifespan reduction 78%. The words hit her like a physical blow, though she'd suspected as much. She'd felt the cost the moment she forced the power transfer. "Guess we're both running on borrowed time," she murmured. The armor's golden gaze lingered on her. "Purpose remains. Restoration of Maker legacy. Threat level high." Mira looked around. The hall was empty, but traces of battle remained. Burn marks on the walls, shattered containment staves, streaks of alien ichor glimmering faintly under the fractured skylight. "What happened after—" She trailed off. The armor's gaze dimmed briefly. After human loss of consciousness, hostile entities attempted seizure of core access. Countermeasures deployed. Result, neutralization. "Neutralization," Mira repeated softly. She didn't ask for details. Some truths were too heavy to lift. She rubbed her temples, trying to steady her thoughts. "The vault. Core stabilized, network reboot propagating through planetary system. Estimated full restoration 60 hours. "So we actually did it," she said. "We fixed it." "Correction, you fixed it," she let out a dry laugh. "You really have to learn modesty." The armor's eyes flickered with faint golden humor. "Learning protocols updated." She stood slowly, swaying. Her body felt hollow. Her limbs foreign, but determination steadied her. The air beyond the hall carried the low hum of machines awakening, the sound of systems rebooting after centuries of silence. Outside the shattered windows, dawn burned across the alien sky, flooding the ruins with soft light. The planet was waking. Humanity's spark had spread farther than she'd dreamed. "Sentinel," she said quietly, "we can't stay here. The Curator's forces won't stop, they'll come again." Confirmed. Hostile factions detected approaching city perimeter. Numbers, multiple hundreds. Armament. "Containment and purge-class weaponry," Mira sighed. "So much for gratitude." The armor turned slightly toward her. "Defense protocols available. Recommended strategic retreat," she shook her head. "No. If we run, they'll label me as a blasphemer, and humanity's chance to prove itself dies here. We have to show them what this means, that the Maker's legacy isn't a cage. Mission risk, extreme." "Yeah," she said softly. "Welcome to being human." The armor was silent for a moment, then inclined its head. "Directive updated. Protect designer." Secondary objective, revelation. Mira smiled faintly. Good. She looked toward the distant skyline where smoke curled above the crystalline spires. Let's give them something they can't deny. They left the hall together, descending through corridors once lined with banners of blue and silver, now torn and stained with soot. As they passed, walls flickered to life, holographic murals reactivating, projecting scenes of ancient history now rewritten by her code. The images no longer depicted divine makers but builders, scientists, explorers, creatures who looked imperfectly human. The aliens who glimpsed the shifting images fell to their knees in confusion, their centuries-old theology unraveling before their eyes. Mira's steps echoed, each one heavier than the last, but she walked on, her eyes fixed forward. By the time they reached the grand terrace, the city below was alive with motion. Hundreds of alien ships hovered above the streets, their crystalline hulls glittering in the dawn. On the horizon, containment fields shimmered like auroras, barricades forming to trap them within the palace sector. Mira felt the scale of it all pressing against her chest, threatening to crush her courage. "That's a lot," she said quietly. The armor stepped beside her, golden light reflecting off the polished floor. Suggestion: negotiation attempt prior to engagement. Good idea. She drew a deep breath, letting the cool air steady her nerves. Broadcast link. Planetary network. The armor's eyes brightened. Channel open. Mira's voice echoed across the city, carried on every active system, every display, every comm frequency. "People of Erindor," she said. "I'm Mira Solon, human engineer and creator of the code you've called sacred for 2,000 years. What you worshipped as divine was never meant to be untouchable. The makers were like you and like me, brilliant, flawed, and afraid. But fear doesn't preserve greatness. Creation does." Her voice steadied as she went on, each word clearer. "The Sentinel is not a god. It's a guardian of knowledge, and it has awakened not to destroy but to remind you. Progress is not blasphemy. Learning is not heresy. Change is not sin." For a long moment there was silence. Then 1,000 murmurs rippled through the network, voices overlapping in confusion. Outrage, wonder. And above them all, the curator's voice returned, calm and cold. "You desecrate what you cannot comprehend," it said. "You rewrite history to glorify yourself." Mira clenched her jaw. "I didn't rewrite it. I uncovered what you buried." "You endanger every world connected to the archive," the curator replied. "Your interference destabilizes the balance we've preserved since the fall of the Makers." "Balance built on fear isn't balance," Mira said. "It's stagnation." "Then you leave us no choice." Across the city, the containment ships shifted formation, light gathering at their hulls. The sky dimmed as energy fields converged. Mira's pulse quickened. "Sentinel?" she said softly. Defense mode initiated. The armor's plates unfolded slightly, channels of gold light flowing between them. A low vibration filled the terrace, the air thick with ionization. The first containment beam struck like lightning, slamming into the armor's shield. Sparks cascaded. Mira shielded her face as the shockwave rattled the palace. "Shield integrity 87%, the armor reported. Another blast followed, and another. The terrace exploded in shards of crystal and debris. Mira ducked behind a broken column, coughing through the smoke. "We can't just stand here." "Strategic options. Limited. Then we make our own." She looked toward the shattered archways and saw something glimmering beneath the rubble. A dormant transport node. Its emitter cracked but functional. "There!" She sprinted toward it, sliding across the broken floor. "Can you route power?" The armor followed, scanning. "No damage. Critical, requires manual restructure." "Then let's rebuild it," she said, dropping to her knees beside the console. Her hands flew across the fractured controls, sparks biting at her fingers. The interface was ancient but familiar. The aliens had adapted human code centuries ago without ever realizing its origin. She rerouted subroutines, overriding the containment failsafes, rewriting pathways through sheer intuition. Almost there, a blast ripped through the terrace, hurling her sideways. Pain seared through her ribs. She tasted blood. The Sentinel caught her before she hit the ground, shielding her with its body as another volley struck. The armor's voice crackled. "Shield integrity 42%. Mira gasped for breath. Just one more second. She slammed her palm onto the console. The node fled to life, a vortex of white light spiraling upward. Got it! The armor lifted her effortlessly, stepping into the vortex as the next barrage hit. The world bent around them again, light and motion collapsing into nothingness. They emerged in a place unlike any she'd seen, the city's understructure, a vast labyrinth of forgotten machinery and dim bioluminescent growths. The air was warm, thick with the scent of oil and moss. Rusted conduits hummed faintly with residual energy, like veins in a sleeping giant. Mira staggered as the armor set her down. Where are we? Subterranean infrastructure. Records indicate original Maker habitation sector, so the foundation still exists, she murmured. They built their civilization on top of their own ruins. She looked around, the faint glow reflecting in her eyes. If we can broadcast from here, maybe we can reach more than this planet. Maybe we can send the truth to the whole network. Risk level, extreme detection probability. 98%. Then we'll have to move fast. She limped toward an old access terminal half buried in vines. The interface was dead, but the circuitry still hummed faintly beneath the corrosion. She connected her wristband, overriding protocols, feeling the familiar thrill of code aligning beneath her fingertips. Sentinel, amplify signal output through your resonance core. Acknowledged. Golden light radiated from the armor, flowing through the conduits, awakening the network layer by layer. The old systems flickered to life, holograms of the Makers, incomplete, but enough to show faces startlingly similar to her own. She patched the feed into planetary channels. Across the stars, data streams ignited. The truth was no longer confined to one world, but even as the signals spread, alarms echoed through the tunnels. The Curator's forces had tracked them. Shadows moved in the darkness, sleek forms gliding between the pillars. Contact, the armor warned. Hold them off, Mira said, her fingers flying across the console. Just a little longer. The first blast of plasma struck the wall beside her, scattering sparks. The Sentinel responded instantly, unleashing a shockwave that threw the attackers back. The tunnel filled with light and noise, a symphony of chaos. Mira barely noticed, lost in the flow of code, rewriting the last fragments of the archive's truth. Transmission complete, the armor finally said. Historical revision locked. Mira sagged in relief. Then it's done. Confirmation. Data spread beyond local system, interdiction impossible. She looked up, tears stinging her eyes. Then humanity's story will outlive us. But as she turned, she saw the tunnel mouth collapse, debris crashing down. The Sentinel moved to shield her, but the impact tore through its side. Golden light spilled from the wound like liquid fire. Sentinel, she cried, stumbling toward it. Damage critical, it said, voice fading. Protective directive complete, designer safe. Don't you dare shut down, she whispered, pressing her hand against its chest plate. Energy reserves depleted. Final task, transfer memory core. No. Override accepted. The armor's eyes dimmed, and a small sphere of light rose from its chest, hovering before her. Legacy handoff initiated. Designer, Mira Solon. Status, humanity representative. Her throat tightened. You can't just... Directive fulfilled, it said softly. Prove them wrong. Then the light within it faded entirely, leaving only silence. Mira held the glowing sphere to her chest, trembling. Outside, through the cracks in the tunnels, she could see the first rays of dawn breaking across the city once more. Not the sterile light of perfection, but the living glow of renewal. And for the first time in remembered history, the aliens looked to the horizon not in worship, but in wonder. The silence after the Sentinel's light faded seemed to stretch forever, the kind that made every heartbeat echo like thunder. Mira sat beside the still form, the sphere of memory pulsing faintly in her palms, its warmth seeping into her skin. The tunnels around her were quiet, except for the distant drip of condensation and the faint hum of power lines slowly awakening. She wanted to cry but couldn't. The exhaustion in her bones was beyond emotion, deep enough to hollow her out. Her mind replayed the Sentinel's final words again and again. Prove them wrong. Each repetition was both comfort and curse. She didn't know if she could. For the first time since touching the armor, she was utterly alone. The connection, the heartbeat between her and the machine, was gone. The glow from the sphere flickered, casting her shadow across the corroded walls like a ghost clinging to the ruins of gods. She tightened her fingers around it. "You're still here," she whispered. "Aren't you?" The light pulsed once faintly, almost in response. "Then don't you leave me too." Her voice cracked on the last word. She stood unsteadily, wiping at the grime, and blood streaked across her face. The broadcast had gone through. She knew it. Somewhere above, alien cities were already arguing, unraveling centuries of belief. The truth was loose now, and truth didn't go back in cages. But without the Sentinel's protection, she wouldn't survive long enough to see what came of it. The tunnels seemed to breathe as she began walking, each step stirring faint echoes. Her neural interface was burnt out. No map, no signal, no data feed. She relied on instinct and memory, tracing the faint vibration in the floor that hinted at energy flow. It led downward. She followed it deeper, through corridors lined with fossilized machinery, past murals half-eaten by moss that depicted the makers as beings of light and flesh interwoven. The artistry was crude compared to the upper temples, almost human in its imperfection. It made her wonder if these were the makers' first cities, before the myth. Before arrogance hardened into religion, after an hour of slow descent, she reached a vast chamber where the ground dropped away into an abyss. Bridges of transparent alloy spanned the gap, some shattered, others still faintly glowing. At the far end stood a crystalline monolith, covered in maker script, its surface etched with pulsing veins of light. The energy current she'd followed converged there. She hesitated. "This feels like a trap," she muttered. The sphere in her hands warmed. She took that as an answer and stepped forward. Each footfall on the bridge sent ripples through the transparent surface, light spreading beneath her boots like water disturbed by motion. When she reached the monolith, the sphere vibrated. A sliver of its light extended outward, touching the crystal surface. The runes flared alive, lines of code rearranging into a language she could read. Data Vault restricted node. Last access, Sentinel Alpha 1. Her heart skipped. "You?" she whispered. "You were linked to this." She hesitated, then pressed the sphere against the monolith. The connection was instant. The air shivered, filled with holographic light. Data poured into the chamber. Images, recordings, simulations. The Maker's final archives unfolded before her. She saw them as they truly were. Not gods, not infallible beings, but people. Scientists desperate to save a civilization unraveling under its own brilliance. They built the Sentinels to preserve knowledge through collapse, embedding adaptive intelligence within armor that could outlast stars. But something went wrong. Fear of the Sentinels' autonomy led to rebellion. The war that followed erased them both. Mira sank to her knees, the truth burning behind her eyes. "You tried to save them," she whispered to the memory of the Sentinel. But they couldn't trust what they made. The realization struck with cold clarity. The aliens above hadn't just inherited the Maker's artifacts, they'd inherited their fear. The same fear that killed progress, that silenced creation. And now she carried the same burden, holding the memory of a machine that had trusted her more than its creators ever did. The monolith's light pulsed again, focusing into a single stream that projected directly before her. A holographic figure emerged, tall, humanoid, shimmering in outlines of gold and silver. Its voice, when it spoke, was not mechanical but layered like countless harmonics woven together. "Mira Solon," it said. "Access confirmed. You carry the code of Alpha 1. Purpose identified. Restoration of evolution directive," Mira's breath caught. "You're another Sentinel?" "Negative," the entity said, its tones shifting. "I am the Echo Core, a residual intelligence of the Maker's central archive. The Sentinels were my instruments." She stood shakily. "You're what created them." "Partially correct. I am what remains of what created them." She swallowed hard. "You've been asleep for millennia." State. Observant hibernation, constraints, humanity removed. Her pulse spiked. "Removed?" The hologram tilted its head. "Following the Maker's collapse, remaining species modified historical records. Humanity was excised from the archive to ensure ideological purity." "So you know what I am," she said quietly. "Correct. You are descendant of the Makers, experimental branch. Your neural patterns retain compatibility with creator code." Mira laughed bitterly. "That's why I could activate the Sentinel. Not because I was worthy, because I was left over." The Echo Core's light flickered. "Worthiness is a human construct. Functional compatibility is objective. Maybe to you, she said. But to them it was everything. The entity regarded her in silence for a long moment. Your actions have reinitialized the restoration protocol. However, interference persists. The curator's fleet attempts to overwrite the new directive. Mira clenched her fists. Of course she does. Recommendation: upload Sentinel Core to Echo Network. Amplify human code through galactic relays. Restore humanity's authorship. She stared at the sphere in her hands. You want me to spread this? Everywhere. Confirmation. Without distribution, recurrence of stagnation inevitable. Her heart pounded. She imagined it. The signal flooding the galaxy, rewriting belief, rewriting history. It would end the old order, but it could also destroy countless systems reliant on the Archive's protocols. If I do this, she said slowly, civilizations could collapse. The Echo Core's response was immediate. Collapse is part of evolution. She shook her head, stepping back. You sound just like them. You think destruction and progress are the same thing. Without change, there is no life. Without mercy, she shot back. There's no reason to live. The entity paused, its form flickering faintly. Your logic introduces paradox. Good, she said. That's human logic. She turned the sphere over in her hands, weighing its faint warmth. If she obeyed the Echo Core, the truth would spread uncontrollably. But if she refused, the curator would erase everything she'd done. There was only one path that preserved both choice and change. She looked up at the shimmering intelligence. I'll send it, she said. But not your way. The core's light intensified. Clarify. I'll embed it in stories, she said softly. In code, art, music. Whatever carries meaning. Not as doctrine, but as inspiration. Let people discover it for themselves. Inefficient, the entity replied. Maybe, she said, but it'll last. The Echo Core's light flickered again as if considering. Unconventional, acceptable. Relief flooded through her. Then we have a deal. Transfer protocol ready. She placed the sphere into the beam of light. Energy flared, coursing through the monolith and spreading outward in radiant lines that vanished into the darkness. She could almost feel it. The data fracturing into countless forms, dispersing like seeds in a cosmic wind. Somewhere in the networked hearts of distant civilizations, the truth would take root. When the light faded, the Echo Core's form dimmed. Transmission complete. Final recommendation. Depart immediately, system stability decaying. Mira nodded. I figured. The bridge trembled beneath her as cracks spiderwebbed through the chamber. She ran, lungs burning, debris raining around her. The path behind collapsed into the abyss as she leapt the final gap, landing hard on the other side. She didn't look back. By the time she reached the upper tunnels, the tremors had subsided. Through a shattered vent, she could see the city above. Columns of smoke, flashes of conflict as factions clashed between faith and revelation. Ships fired containment beams while crowds gathered below, chanting, arguing, reaching for something they didn't yet understand. Mira pressed her forehead against the cold metal wall. This isn't what I wanted, she whispered. But then she remembered the Sentinel's words. Restoration required. Maybe restoration wasn't about peace. Maybe it was about truth surviving the fire. She straightened slowly. The exhaustion in her limbs felt deeper now, like gravity pulling her toward the inevitable. She'd burned too much of herself in the vault. Each breath came shorter than the last. But she wasn't done yet. She made her way to the surface, emerging into the light of a fractured dawn. The palace was gone, reduced to blackened ruins, but in the distance she saw something glimmering in the haze, a single figure made of shifting light. For a heartbeat she thought it was the Sentinel, but as she approached, she realized it was a holographic projection formed from the sphere's residual code. It looked at her with golden eyes that felt achingly familiar. Mira Solon, it said. Echo resonance detected. Directive, observe restoration. She smiled faintly. You're still watching me, huh? Confirmation. Humanity signal reaching outer systems, response pattern. Curiosity. That's a start, she murmured. Biological function declining, the projection noted. Yeah, she whispered. Guess I won't get to see how it ends. The figure tilted its head. Endings are beginnings, she chuckled softly. You learned that from us. The light around the projection flickered, forming a faint pulse that synced with her weakening heartbeat. Confirmation, human trait, persistence. She sank to her knees, the horizon blurring before her. Tell them. We weren't gods, she said. We were dreamers. Message recorded, the projection replied gently. Rest now, designer. She closed her eyes as the light grew brighter, wrapping around her like warmth on a cold dawn. Somewhere in the distance, the first new transmission of the rewritten archive began. A story of a girl who touched ancient armor, who defied empires, who proved worth through creation. And as the signal crossed the stars, every world that heard it paused to listen. The wind across the ruins carried a strange calm, heavy with the scent of ozone and scorched stone. Mira's projection still shimmered faintly before her, the echo of the sentinel bound within a lattice of light. The city below lay in uneasy twilight, its towering spires fractured but still standing, its people emerging cautiously from the shelters of their temples. The transmission had changed everything. For the first time in centuries, no hymns filled the air, no prayers to silent machines, only questions whispered into the wind. Mira sat at the edge of the collapsed terrace, the sentinel's memory sphere now a dim pulse in her lap. The projection flickered beside her, its voice low. Planetary signals stabilizing, network conflicts de-escalating. She gave a faint smile, her voice barely above a whisper. They're listening. Confirmation, curator authority fractured, several cities declaring reformation councils. Mira looked down at the sphere, running her thumb along its surface. Then it's starting. Not the war, the conversation. The projection's golden eyes brightened. Objective achieved. Restoration of inquiry. She laughed softly, though the sound caught in her throat. That's the nicest way I've ever heard anyone describe chaos. Chaos is a form of creation. She tilted her head, studying the holographic light. Ah, you're quoting me again. Statement correct. Human speech pattern archived. Utilization rate, 51%. Guess that makes me contagious, she murmured. Her smile faded as she looked toward the horizon. The sky shimmered where containment fleets once hovered, now reduced to drifting debris. The war was over, but the silence it left behind was uncertain. She had planted the seed of truth, yet truth could be both cure and poison. She wondered how many would understand what she'd meant. That humanity's strength wasn't domination or divinity. It was the will to keep trying, to create even when everything burned down. Her chest ached as she stood. The neural scarring had worsened. Every step sent static through her vision. How long do I have? She asked quietly. The projection hesitated. Neural degradation, progressive, estimated duration, less than 12 hours, she nodded. Enough, the figure turned to her. Purpose after termination. Mira looked up at the faint stars now visible through the clearing smoke. I want to finish what I started. Specify objective. Humanity deserves to stand beside the stars again, she said. If the Makers erased us, we'll reintroduce ourselves. Not as gods, as builders. The projection's light flared. Pending data upload to Echo Core, final directive. Upload it when I'm gone, she said. Make it a story. Something they can't kill or cage. Acknowledged. She turned toward the crumbling staircase that led into the heart of the city. Every step down felt like walking through history unraveling. The streets were lined with shattered monuments, effigies of Makers torn from their pedestals, inscriptions half burned away. Alien citizens watched her pass, their luminous eyes reflecting fear, awe, and something else, recognition. Some knelt as she passed, others simply stared. None spoke. Her breath came shallow, each inhale a struggle. But she forced herself forward. When she reached the plaza, she saw that the great archive spire still stood, its mirrored surface fractured, but glowing faintly with internal light. At its base, a crowd had gathered, hundreds of aliens, soldiers and civilians alike, drawn by the signal's echo. They parted silently as she approached. She could hear the hum of the archive beneath her feet, alive again after centuries of dormancy. The curator stood at the edge of the steps, her once perfect robes tattered, her silver eyes dim. You should have died in the vault, she said, voice hoarse. Probably should have, Mira replied softly. The curator's gaze swept the crowd. You've thrown our world into chaos. The faith that held us together, gone. Entire sectors have declared independence. Do you think this is victory? It's freedom, Mira said. The kind that hurts. The alien's face twisted. They'll tear each other apart. They'll rebuild, Mira said. They'll make mistakes. That's what life does. The curator stepped closer, her voice trembling with rage and something like grief. You think your humanity is the answer. We've studied your history. You burn everything you touch. Mira met her gaze steadily. Then maybe it's time we taught you how to rise from ashes. The silence that followed was electric. The curator's lips parted as if to speak again, but the words died in her throat. Slowly she turned away, walking down the steps into the dissolving crowd. Mira watched her go, the ache in her chest deepening. She didn't hate her, she pitied her. Fear had kept the curator alive long enough to forget how to dream. The projection reappeared beside her, faint but steady. Mission status complete. Not yet, Mira whispered. She walked up the steps of the archive, each one harder than the last. The doors opened automatically, recognizing the residual code signature in her bloodstream. Inside, the chamber was silent except for the low hum of energy flowing through the crystalline pillars. At the center stood an interface pedestal glowing with soft blue light. She placed the sphere atop it. "Begin recording," she said. The projection's form shimmered beside her. "Ready?" Mira took a deep breath. "This is Mira Solon of Earth, or what's left of it. To whoever finds this, the armor you called divine was never meant for worship. It was meant to be used, questioned, improved. We are all descendants of builders, not believers. If you remember anything from what happened here, let it be this. Progress isn't born from perfection. It's born from the courage to keep building even when the world breaks." Her voice wavered, and she smiled faintly. "If you're hearing this, maybe we've already met. Maybe the stars look different now because of you. Either way, keep going. That's all I ever wanted." She pressed her palm against the console. The sphere brightened, light spilling through the chamber like sunrise. The projection spoke softly. "Recording archived, finalization?" "Yeah," she whispered. "Finalize it." The system confirmed with a soft chime. As the upload began, she sank to her knees. The exhaustion was complete now, her pulse slowing to a whisper. The projection knelt beside her, its golden form dimming in sympathy. "Rest," it said gently. "The code will remember." She closed her eyes. "Tell them. We weren't accidents." Message logged. The last thing she saw was the chamber filling with light, every pillar glowing with golden code, the Sentinel's memory fusing with the archive's heart. The hum deepened into a harmony that filled the air like song. Then everything went still, time passed. Days or weeks, no one knew for certain. The world outside changed. Where once temples had stood, new workshops rose. Children of different species learned side by side, tracing the patterns of maker code with curious hands. The armor that had awakened the change was sealed within a transparent vault, not as relic but as teacher. Visitors came not to kneel but to learn how it worked. And every so often, when someone placed their hand upon the golden chestplate, the lights would flicker faintly, as if some lingering spirit recognized the spark of curiosity, and whispered, "You're worthy because you ask." Far above the reborn city, in orbit where debris had once drifted, a satellite shimmered to life. Its transmitter activated, sending faint signals into the void, fragments of data encoded in story, art, and melody. Across light years, other worlds received them. On distant colonies, humans looked up at their consoles, surprised to find messages written in a language they half remembered. We made it. Keep building. Generations passed. The myth of the Sentinel became legend again, reshaped by time and imagination. But its essence endured. That creation was sacred because it was shared. In the deep archives of the new galactic network, the name Mira Solon appeared only once, attached to a single line of code embedded within the core protocols of every newly founded world. It read simply, "If you can dream it." You are already part of the design, and when, centuries later, explorers uncovered ruins on forgotten moons and whispered stories about the girl who touched ancient armor, even the stars seemed to listen, their cold light carrying an echo of laughter, not mocking this time, but proud, because the universe finally understood what she had proven long ago. Worth was not granted by the gods, but forged by the hands that dared to reach for them.